Hi, I'm LA and welcome to my lab. If you don't know who I am, I'm a freelance illustrator. You may have seen some of my creations on TikTok, and we're gonna draw today. I was commissioned to draw my client's superhero character, Astara, with Buddy from The Incredibles at the bar. So let's work on that. The process is typically the same every time. I just work on lining everything and conveying enough detail as I can using the line art first. While we line this piece, let's talk about how it's already February 7th, at least at the time of recording this. Don't look at the date on this video, okay? I'm glad to finally record the voiceover for this because this file's just been sitting in the corner of my computer, haunting me over the past few days, and it feels like time's just been racing by. They say time flies by when you're having fun. I think it flies by when you're scared of the upcoming future too. But yeah, I had a lot of plans for February. We're a week in, so I'm probably going to film again later, and I've been thinking of drawing more Black characters. Surprisingly, I don't do that often, but at the same time, while there are more Black characters than there were before, there also aren't that many depending on what you're into, you know? Like, there's plenty of like Black characters for early 2000s hip-hop type of shows, but I'm really into anime and horror and things like that. And you know, if you're into horror, you know the common trope is that the people of color typically are cut out first, so if they're at all. But I might find a few and draw those for upcoming videos. Also, if any of you like to draw along or anything like that, let me know what you're working on. I'd like to hear it in the comments. Speaking of drawing together, I also streamed while I was working on this, and we had like a fun time drawing together. I mean, there were a few not so friendly viewers in the chat, but most of you guys were pretty chill, which was nice. I have no set schedule for when I stream, but make sure to check out my TikTok, link below. I typically do it at night. Sometimes I'll surprise people and like do it early in the day, but yeah. I'm still lining this image, as you can see, and surprisingly, this piece went kind of smoothly. Every now and then there's like that one piece where you're just like, okay, this is a good start. I sometimes struggle with drawing Buddy a lot, or just drawing different angles or poses. This time around, I liked it. I liked everything that was happening here. The character we're drawing right now, Astara, my client mentioned that she uses boxing as her fighting method, so I indicated more tonnage in the arm. And you can probably find more information about them if you check out their TikTok. I'll link that down below. They post art stuff every now and then. And a lot of the people who commission me tend to be artists, which is nice because you can always look at their page and try to get a gist of what type of stuff they like or what type of character they're probably going for. Something I get complimented on often when I'm illustrating is, LA, your line work is so clean. How did you get it so clean? And a big tip I have, if I don't know, anyone's interested in that from me, is if you want cleaner line work, don't use a pencil. Do not use a brush on opacity. Maybe in the sketching phase, I guess, but even then, try to avoid that. I don't use opacity often. I use it sometimes to like indicate where large shapes are, like the shading beneath Buddy's chin here. But for the most part, I use a hard brush when I like sketch digitally. And when I used to draw traditionally, I would always use an ink pen. That way you commit to whatever mark you make. So that could help you with making cleaner line work, is working with a material that doesn't allow you to go back and erase what you've done previously. Also, make sure to use strong, confident strokes. I don't know what those words mean. People always say that about my work. They always say you should do that as an artist. I don't know what those words mean. If I had to guess, I think they mean drawing from your shoulder and not like making shaky, scratchy movements with your wrist, things like that. I was having a lot of fun illustrating this because it's a very luxurious illustration, We have the wine glasses, we have the jewelry, the dress was nice to draw, all those things. So that really added some nice fun for me. And especially talking about line art, when it comes to drawing glass, I enjoy indicating how the glass is shiny using I feel like I don't want to say dated, but like a retro technique of like just drawing the shine on instead of like letting the shine speak for itself. I like to highlight where it is. In here, I am tracing. When I was streaming, people were like, oh my gosh, you're tracing. Yeah, I'm tracing. I'm not gonna worry about how real life objects look. I could draw it if I wanted to, but when you're working on a commission, you wanna get things done. You wanna make something your client will like. And yeah, and also it's just a glass. There's a million like it. And I'm seeing a tangent now. They say don't point out your mistakes. I'm gonna point it out because it's irritating me. But you can see where the glass meets with her pinky. I should have brought that out more because it's all kind of like coming to one point. But that's an important thing to keep an eye on when you're creating illustrations. That not everything is meeting at the same point. That everything is like a different plane. Does that make sense? And that's what I meant, the indication of shine on the glass. I love that. It really gives off like old comic vibes to me. It really gives off like very sharp graphic shapes. People always ask me funny little questions when I draw live, so I'll try to answer those. One thing people ask is, what brush do you use? I use Kyle's cartooning, but I feel like the brush doesn't really... I wouldn't say the brush doesn't really matter much. I feel like some people ask because they like the brush, but I feel like other people ask because they think, oh, if I get that brush, I'll do the same thing. And I feel like it's really the person at times. I like Kyle's cartooning brush just because it's kind of gritty, but even then I go in post and I edit the line art so it looks different than how the brush itself looks. So I wouldn't like chalk it up to that. I feel like it's a very simple brush. It's just like straight black with like a little bit of tooth to it. But yeah, people always ask me as well, why do you color your sketch? So I can see better. That's just it. People always ask, they're like, why is the undersketch red? Why is the undersketch blue? So I can see it. That's really it. A lot of people think that when you make art, it's either traditional or digital. You can't do both. I started out with traditional and then I moved to digital. I've done and continue to do both. Traditional, I don't show as much online. I mainly use it for like sketching and stuff because I like the tactile feeling. But I say this because with traditional art, when I was initially learning, you would draw with a cyan or a red pencil and ink on top in black, and then scan it and adjust the colors with like curves or whatever to hide your undersketch. So that's also another reason why I use red/blue out of habit. Here I'm adding the bottles in the background. My client specifically wanted them to be at a bar. We were debating, they were like, bar or restaurant, and they chose a bar. So I'm just indicating the bar using like a little juice cabinet. That was my first thought, just because like I play The Sims 4. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called when like all the bottles are lined up in one little area. There's probably like a different name for it, but that was my first thought. But yeah, I'm just touching up certain areas. I love adding big brows to Syndrome. People are always like, why are the brows up? Because I like them. I like big brows. That's part of my art style, thick brows. If you have skinny eyebrows and you want to commission me, I don't know what to tell you because I might accidentally make those things big. I then go on to just copy and paste the bottles, and I move them around a bit that we don't feel copy and pasted. You want to have a little bit of alteration, that way it doesn't feel like a cheap trick. Does that make sense? A little bit of variety helps sell it that it's a realistic setting where different things are everywhere. But I'm just thickening the line art in some areas, I'm emphasizing it in others, I'm making some more shapes visible. I've been really going in lately with more darker shadows in certain areas. And at this point, I'm adding in the hair, but I'm gonna go back and change this later because I didn't like it. The locks look too thick and short, and from what my client showed me, I believe they want the locks a bit longer and thinner strands. I was also looking through the color palettes I tend to use, and I was like, which color palette should I do? I was thinking like a night bar, like a nightclub scene, and I'll go back later and change this a bit because the reference image my client sent was more of a midday type of bar, you know, more of like a, you go there for a nice eat, maybe get a drink or two, not like a oomps oomps rave music type of vibe. At this point, I began adding more details to the dress, and later on I'm gonna mention like, oh, the footage got lost, I found it. So just ignore that. But this is like, I'm coloring in the dress details. The dress they wanted had like a lot of sequins and like a kind of sequin gradient, like they're like a large collection up top and they slowly depleted as it went down. And I use a stippling brush to add this, and I just like stipple less the closer I get to the bosom area. I begin to add the fade using a gradient and a short hair brush. I'm using the Fur Brush by Devon. I find it helpful for hair. I don't draw animals enough. I use it for hair. I use it for purposes not intended. But now I'm adding the flat colors in everywhere. I decide to give her lipstick, and I start working on the drinks. When it comes to the drinks, I didn't want to overly blend them because this is a cell shaded piece. So I mainly use different colors that are very close to each other to convey that it's liquid. So I color pick from the drinks chosen, and these are just random drinks. My client didn't specify what they wanted, so I just typed in luxury drinks, and I got to work eye dropping here and there and just putting hues where I felt they looked good. I'm indicating things like the glass being see-through by choosing different hues. So for example, where Astara's thumb is behind the glass, I choose a slightly darker orangey tone, things like that. I continue to touch up areas here and there. And this piece will mainly just be like a huge attention to detail. Now, a little bit of the footage was lost. As you can see, a couple things happened here that didn't come on camera. Luckily, it's still in flat color, so I don't think anything too big happened where you might be like, oh my gosh, how did she do that? It's just a lot of flat color at this point. I'm still doing the flat color layer. You can see my layers in the corner. Mind your business. But yeah, I'm still on the same layer. I then go in and add highlights to the lips, and I want them to be like a little bit glossy, like she has makeup on. I'm thinking, oh, okay, if it's like a nice night, maybe like a little bit of lipstick. And here, I start doing a gradient map. If you've been watching my live streams lately, you've been noticing I've been playing around with those. I had no idea how to use gradient maps before, but I figured it out. And I've been using them to help maintain my more minimalistic palette. This is definitely not like a 2-color or a 3-color minimalistic, but minimal as in like there's not 20 different colors going on. At least I try not to do that. I started to work on the background a bit more, and because they said simplistic, I was thinking like a early 2000s cartoon background, you know, like something very simple. It conveys the idea, but it doesn't take like 500 years. I'm also referencing their image they sent me for the pose to understand like what they were thinking of when they mentioned bar. So in the image, it seems like the couple were at the edge of a bar. There was the whole cabinet behind them, and there appeared to be a stone wall, like perhaps a divider to separate different parts of the venue they're at. I'm also going in and just adding a few basic colors to the wine bottles in the back. Just enough so like it doesn't distract from where the eyes should focus, which is on the main two subjects, but you can still tell what's in the background and doesn't feel underworked. Here I started going with the locks, and I did struggle a bit with the locks. A lot of things are going to happen here. I used a darker maroon tone for the background of the hair, and I have my reference image up. I'm looking at that. Like, okay, so this is the texture they're hoping for. And I switched from the dark maroon background to the more amber golden one. And if you don't have afro hair, you may not know this. I think it applies sometimes to straight hair, but in a different way. If you do have afro hair, you've probably seen this before, but light tends to shine through the least compact areas, the very edges. So I indicate the shape of the hair by adding like a little bit of lighting to the very edges, and then like softening that up the closer it gets to the very meat of the hair. I don't know how else to phrase it, but center of the hair with Afrocentric hair dark, outer edges thinner, so light's going to shine through. I start adding the shading at this point, and I'm still referencing the image they sent for where to place shadows and whatnot. So I really appreciate when my clients send references. It means less thinking for me. Less thinking for me, and I know what they want. So it works out for everyone. I'm sculpting Buddy's face out a bit more. I felt like it was too shrouded in darkness, and while we all understand how shadows work, I also thought they looked kind of weird at this point. I don't know. There's also this weird line down the center of him. I'm not sure where that came from. Like, I have an idea, but it goes away at one point, thankfully. So if you're noticing that like I am, it goes away at one point, so that's the good news. It may have came from lighting on top, or I may have made a mark and not realized it. I don't know. At this point, I was darkening the whole image. I work with flat colors, and then I suit the flat colors to whatever lighting is happening. I dim them a bit, and then I place the gradient map on top, and I apply like lighting and shadows, etc., etc. At this point, I placed everything on an artboard, and I placed the artboard side by side, and artboard number 2 had all the reference images that I could directly compare the two and see them right next to each other to understand how they're supposed to be. I clean up more areas. You know, something I do hate, it's just like the user error probably, is that when a piece has a lot of things going on, I always forget something. Something always doesn't go quite as you see it. But at this point, I'm adding reflective lighting, and that's like the lighting coming off their surroundings, bouncing onto them. I begin to add textures, and as you can see, I'm using the base layer. And this was filmed a few days ago, like a week ago, which is crazy because back when I used this at first, I had no idea what I was doing. I was studying like the page and stuff, and now I figured out a bit more. I understand a bit better how to use the textures and whatnot. But when I used them for this, I used them very minimally because I was like, I don't know what's happening. But I go over the whole image and I double check with the reference to make sure I have as much lighting indicated as I can, given the parameters of the commissioned piece. This is a cel-shaded illustration with a simplistic background. There's a little bit of blending happening, but some areas had to have it because of the background. With the addition of a background, I try to convey mood if there is one. So if you're like, oh, they're outside at winter, even if with a little bit of blending, I'm going to imply like the bounce of light from the snow coming onto skin, stuff like that. But I'm just zooming in, checking areas. I'm adding a bit of cool shading to break up all this warmth. A little bit here and there just to break it up a little bit. You don't want to have too much of a warm palette. I mean, you can. People know how to work with it. But I don't like to have too much because then I feel like the whole image is just like orange or red or yellow. I continue to add a bit of brightness here and there. I add a paper texture on top. I add some color dodge layers to add a little bit more brightness, and I'm really focusing on making sure they're both clearly visible. Because Syndrome is so pale, you're gonna see his face. But the background has lots of brown tones, and I don't want my brown subject to blend in. So when you have characters who are 2 different skin tones, or when you have an environment close to a character's skin tone, you want to use elements to help break that up so that you can see the character fully. I'm adding more slate shading here and there just to indicate where everything is and to separate those planes. I add some highlights and shading to the jewelry. I'm trying not to miss any details. This is a highly detailed piece. Something else important I find to do is to erase some heavily blended areas here and there. That way the blending isn't too soft and the whole thing looks muddy. And then I go in and I add his hairline. I like to blend in the hairline a bit for pushback hairstyles like this. It depends. Sometimes I line it, sometimes I don't. It depends on the color of the hair, the type of hair. With Syndrome's hair, his hair doesn't have many lines in it, or I feel like it would take away. So I tend to go for a more blended hairline. At this point, I'm blending the background. That way it feels more focused on the two main subjects. And also blending the whole piece and placing it on top. Chest hairs are like the parsley to a man's bosom. But I add some finishing details. I keep just adding more adjustment layers and little details I forget, like his freckles. I even add like more indication to his smile. Now I mainly just go over the whole image to make sure everything looks all right. I checked the sketch to make sure I didn't add anything there that I forgot, and I did. I forgot to add a little bit of blush to the cheeks. I double checked my references to make sure everything matched, and we have the finished piece. I'm happy with how this turned out. My client liked it, I liked it, and when I streamed, the stream liked it. Make sure to check out my TikTok whenever you catch me in a stream. Make sure to follow to see more art videos, and thanks so much for watching. Until next time, bye.